Hi everyone, in today's video we're going to talk about how to graph lines using slope-intercept form. So if you remember, up to this point what we've done so far to graph equations of lines is to make a table. And so this form, slope-intercept form, that we've already been working with a little bit, is going to give us kind of an easier way to graph lines so that we can avoid making those tables. So let's look at an example of slope-intercept form and then talk about how this is going to help us graph linear equations. First thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to write an equation. We know slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So that's the general form. Now, an example might be y equals, let's say, 2/3 x plus 4. And let's look at those parts. There's really two important parts here that we're going to talk about, and that's our m and our b. So I'm going to circle this. In the example I gave, my m is 2/3. Now that should be familiar to us. We know that m we use to represent the slope. So in this equation, my slope is 2/3. Now, what we can use to help us remember, we're going to say that the m tells us how to move from one point to another. Whoops, from one point to another. And you'll see how that works in a minute when we start graphing. Now the b, in this case my b is a positive 4. The b for us is going to stand for our y-intercept. And the y-intercept is where our line crosses the y-axis. Now, when we're graphing, let me scooch this over here. When we're graphing, this y-intercept, the b, tells us where to begin. And again, you'll see this in a minute when we start graphing. So, when we're using slope-intercept form to graph, here's some general steps we're going to follow. The first thing we're going to do is rearrange our equation into slope-intercept form. And this is really the skill you guys were working on last week when we did that maze, if you can think back. So let's look at this example. Our equation here is 3x plus y equals 2. Now, I know that's not in slope-intercept form because the y is not by itself yet. I need to do some work to get that into slope-intercept form. So if I want y all by itself, that means I'm going to have to move this 3x. And I'm going to do that by subtracting. So when I subtract, I have y equals, I'm going to grab my x term first, so that minus is going to come with negative 3x. Since this is a positive 2, my equation will be negative 3x plus 2. So now I have two important pieces here, right? I know I have my slope, that's the coefficient, the number in front of x, and I have my b, which is my constant term there. So here's how this is going to work. We're going to graph the y-intercept first. Because remember, b equals begin. That's why we start with our y-intercept. So in this case, our y-intercept was 2, so that means on the y-axis here, I find where y has a value of positive 2, and I'm going to make a point there. So now I've graphed my y-intercept. Now I'm going to use the slope to graph more points. Remember, m tells us how to move to find more points. So in my case, I know my slope is negative 3. Now, we think of slope, I'm going to make a note here. We think of slope as rise over run. So to make this a fraction, if I have -3, I know that's the same as -3 over 1. So starting at my y-intercept, my slope is going to tell me to go down 3 because that's negative, and then to the right 1. That's how I find my second point. Once I have my 2 points, then I can just draw a straight line between those points. So I would use a straight edge. I don't have one with me, but you should absolutely use your straight edges here. And I'm going to draw a straight line through those points. So that's how we graph using slope-intercept form. Okay, we'll do one more example and then we'll save the other one for class. So again, our directions tell us to graph the equation, graph the following equations. There's an extra word there. Graph the following equations using the slope and y-intercept. So the first thing I always do if I look back at my steps, I look and see if I need to rearrange the equation. Now this one's actually nice. That first step has been done for us. Y is all by itself, so I can easily pick out my pieces. I know that m, like the coefficient of x, is m, which is my slope. So my slope is -1 over 4. I know that constant, or the number all by itself, that's going to be my y-intercept. Now, when I go to graph, again, I start with my y-intercept. That's where I begin. So my y-intercept is a +2, so I make a point at +2 on the y-axis. And I'm going to use my slope to locate another point. Now, my slope is -1/4, so I'm going to go down 1 and to the right 4. Now, I should make a note here. What I just did really was this. So I went down 1 and to the right 4. It's important for us to understand that that is the same as this right here. As long as I just have one negative, that's the same. So I could have also gone up 1 and to the left 4. So if I go up 1 and to the left 4, I can find a third point on that line as well. And then again, I'm just going to draw a straight line as best I can here. I should have my straight edge through those 3 points. And again, I draw a nice straight line with arrows on either end. All right, we'll skip the next example for now. And we'll do one more on this last page here. All right, so remember, my goal again is to graph the linear equation using slope-intercept form. So the first thing I notice here is that my equation is not yet in slope-intercept form. I need to get y by itself. To do that here, I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides. When I do that, I get y equals, I'm going to grab my x term, -2x. Since this is 3, I have a +3. And now I have my slope-intercept form. My slope, I know, is the coefficient of x, so that's -2. My y-intercept is the constant term, and so that's a +3. So just like we've done before, I begin here with my y-intercept. Since my y-intercept is a +3, I go to the y-axis and I find where I have +3. That's my first point. Now again, with slope, -2 is the same as -2 over 1. So I can go down 2 and to the right 1. I could also think of it as 2 over -1, which means I would go up 2 and left 1. Again, 3 points is a nice way to check that you've got them all in a straight line. And then we could use our straight edge to draw a straight line through those points. Sorry about that. All right, so again, we'll save the next one as a warm-up for class tomorrow. I know for a lot of you this was a review, but even if it's new, hopefully this gives you a good idea on how to do these types of problems. All right, make sure you've got all your notes filled in and they're complete and detailed. I'll check in the video when we get back to class and then you'll do some practice. Thanks.